The night was dark, and the wind howled through the streets of Cape Town. The road leading to Table Bay Bridge was quiet, with only a few cars passing by. It had rained earlier, and the road was still wet, reflecting the streetlights like broken pieces of glass. Richard Roberts was driving alone, his grip tight on the steering wheel. His mind was heavy with thoughts about his family, his company, and the endless responsibilities that came with being the CEO of Roberts Group. He had spent his whole life proving himself, not just to his father, but also to his older brother Jason. Even though Jason was the eldest, Richard had been given more responsibility and trusted to make decisions that shaped the company. Their father had always seen Richard as more capable and disciplined, and Jason hated that. Richard's phone buzzed on the seat beside him. He glanced at the screen, a text message from an unknown number. "You're in danger. Get out now." Before he could react, bright headlights flashed in his rearview mirror. A black SUV was speeding toward him. Before Richard could swerve, the SUV rammed into the back of his car with full force. His tires skidded on the wet road. The car spun wildly, the city lights blurring around him. Then everything went silent. The car broke through the guardrail, and before he knew it, Richard was plunging into the cold, dark waters below. Meanwhile, in Johannesburg, Anna Mokoena was exhausted. She had just finished her night shift at the restaurant and was riding her old scooter back to her tiny apartment in Soweto. The streets were mostly empty except for a few taxis and late-night workers like her. She turned a corner and suddenly saw a man stumbling into the road. She gasped, squeezing the brakes, but it was too late. Thud! The scooter hit him and he collapsed onto the pavement. Anna's heart pounded. She jumped off and rushed to his side. He was drenched, his clothes soaked through as if he had been caught in a storm. Blood streaked down the side of his face, mixing with the water dripping from his hair. His shirt was torn, revealing scratches along his arms. But even with the dirt and blood, he was undeniably handsome. His jawline was sharp, his nose straight, and his lips slightly parted as he groaned in pain. His hair, though wet and messy, framed his face in a way that made him look like someone out of a movie, if that movie involved a man getting hit by a scooter in the middle of the night. "Hey, are you okay?" Anna asked, shaking him gently. He groaned but didn't wake up. A few people on the street turned to look but didn't stop to help. Panic filled her chest. She couldn't just leave him here. She bit her lip, then pulled out her phone. "I need to call an ambulance," she muttered to herself. But before she could dial, a voice in her head stopped her. Ambulances cost money. A lot of money. Anna barely had enough money to pay her rent. She couldn't afford to be responsible for someone else's hospital bill. She looked at the man again. His face was sharp and well-defined, like someone who had never struggled a day in his life. "What were you doing wandering in the street like this?" she mumbled. She sighed and made a decision she would later question. She reached down, grabbed his arms, and struggled to lift him onto her scooter. "This is the dumbest thing I've ever done," she muttered as she started the engine. She had no idea that this one decision would change her life forever. The early morning news spread like wildfire across South Africa. The headline flashed on every television screen. Billionaire CEO Richard Roberts missing after car accident, rescue teams continue search. At the Roberts Group headquarters in Cape Town, employees whispered in hushed voices as the news played in the lobby. Some gasped in shock. Others stared in disbelief. In the Roberts family mansion, Richard's mother, Margaret Roberts, sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she held onto her husband, Thomas Roberts. Tears streamed down her face. "I don't understand. How did this happen?" she whispered. Jason Roberts, Richard's older brother, stood near the window, his face unreadable. Unlike his mother, he wasn't crying. He had always been jealous of Richard, his success, his power, the way their father trusted him more. And now Richard was gone. Jason turned to his father. "We need to face reality, Dad. Richard is gone, and the company needs leadership. We can't just wait around hoping he'll be found." Margaret glared at him, her eyes filled with pain. "How can you say that? He is your brother. We should be searching for him, not talking about business." Thomas Roberts, usually a strong and commanding figure, looked weak. He ran a hand through his graying hair and exhaled slowly. "The rescue team hasn't found a body yet. Until they do, we don't assume anything." Jason clenched his jaw. He needed to act fast. If Richard was truly dead, this was his chance to take over the Roberts group once and for all. Far from the chaos, Richard's eyes fluttered open in a dimly lit hospital room in Johannesburg. His head pounded, and his entire body ached. He felt weak, confused, and strangely empty. A nurse stood beside his bed, checking his vitals. When she saw him waking up, she smiled gently. "You're awake," she said softly. Richard blinked. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in his ribs stopped him. He groaned. Where am I?" His voice was hoarse, unfamiliar to his own ears. "You're in Hillbrow General Hospital," the nurse replied. "You were found unconscious on the street last night. Do you remember what happened?" Richard tried to think. Images of water, darkness, and crashing metal flashed through his mind. He closed his eyes and focused. Who was he? Where was he before this? Nothing. His breathing quickened. I don't know," he whispered. Panic crept into his voice. "I don't remember anything." The nurse gave him a sympathetic look. "It seems you've suffered memory loss, probably from head trauma. The doctor will explain more soon. Just rest for now." Richard swallowed hard. Memory loss? He couldn't even remember his own name. His heart pounded. Who was he? Anna Mokoena sat nervously in the hospital waiting room, biting her lip. The events of last night replayed in her head. The mysterious wounded man stumbling into the street, her scooter hitting him, the decision to bring him here instead of calling an ambulance. The moment she had carried him into the hospital, the doctors rushed him into emergency care. But then came the part she was dreading, the hospital bills. She had barely been able to afford the taxi ride home last night. Now, the hospital expected her to pay for a man she didn't even know. She sighed heavily. What have I gotten myself into? A doctor approached, holding a clipboard. "Miss Mokoena?" Anna stood up quickly. "Yes, that's me." The doctor adjusted his glasses. "The man you brought in has no ID, no phone, nothing to identify him. He has suffered mild head trauma and a concussion, leading to temporary memory loss." Anna felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. At least he wasn't permanently injured. The doctor continued. "Without any identification, we have no way of contacting his family or finding out who he is. Under normal circumstances, we would transfer him to a government facility, but with our current patient load, we don't have space." Anna raised an eyebrow. "So, what does that mean?" The doctor hesitated. "He needs a place to stay and someone to monitor him until he recovers. Since you were the one who brought him in..." Anna's eyes widened. Wait, are you saying I have to take care of him?" The doctor sighed. "He has no one else. It's just temporary, until he remembers something or we find his family." Anna groaned internally. She could barely afford to take care of herself, let alone a strange man. But as she looked through the glass window into his hospital room, she saw him lying there, helpless, confused. Something in her heart softened. She couldn't just leave him. Hours later, Anna pushed open the door to her small one-bedroom apartment in Soweto. "All right," she muttered, dragging Richard inside. "Welcome to my palace." Richard, still weak and a little disoriented, looked around, his face twisted in confusion. "This is... small." Anna rolled her eyes. "Well, excuse me, Mr. No Memory. You don't exactly have many options right now." Richard sighed and sat down on the worn-out couch. "So what now?" Anna crossed her arms. "Now you get better, and when you remember who you are, you leave." Richard frowned. "And what if I never remember?" Anna hesitated. The thought hadn't crossed her mind. She sighed. "Let's not think about that, okay? Just try to sleep. You can have the couch." Richard blinked at her. "What about you?" "I have a bed," she said simply. "And before you get any ideas, no, I'm not giving it to you." Richard smirked slightly. "I wasn't going to ask." Anna narrowed her eyes. "Good." She turned to leave, but before she could, Richard asked, "One more thing. What's my name?" Anna hesitated. She hadn't thought about that either. You don't have one," she admitted, "until we figure out who you are." Richard sighed and leaned back against the couch. "Great. So I'm just some nameless guy in a stranger's house." "Pretty much," Anna replied, grabbing a blanket and tossing it at him. As she walked to her room, she muttered, "This is going to be a disaster." She had no idea just how right she was. Anna was used to struggling. She had been struggling since the day she was born. Her father had died when she was just a child. She barely even remembered him, only vague images of a strong, warm presence and a deep laugh that echoed through their tiny home. But after he passed away, life had never been the same. Her mother, Nandi Mokoena, had been an artist, talented but struggling. She painted beautiful portraits and landscapes, but in a world where people cared more about survival than art, making a living was tough. Anna grew up watching her mother work tirelessly, sometimes selling her paintings for almost nothing, just to put food on the table. They had survived together, leaning on each other for strength. But then, a few months ago, her mother had fallen ill. The doctors called it a rare heart condition. The treatment was expensive, too expensive for a waitress who could barely afford her rent. And just like that, the last person Anna had in this world was gone. Now, she was alone. No family, no support. Just her small, one-bedroom apartment in Soweto and the never-ending battle to make ends meet. And now, to make things worse, she had a demanding, entitled house guest. The next morning, Anna woke up to the sound of someone moving around in her tiny kitchen. She groaned, rubbing her eyes before sitting up. The handsome guy with no memory. She had almost forgotten about him. She dragged herself out of bed and walked into the kitchen, where she found him standing in front of the fridge with a deep frown on his face. He was shirtless, revealing a toned chest and strong arms, but she was too tired to care about that. "What are you doing?" she asked, rubbing her temples. Richard turned to her, looking completely unimpressed. "I'm looking for breakfast." Anna blinked. "Breakfast?" "Yes, the meal people eat in the morning," he said, as if she were the dumbest person in the world. Anna crossed her arms. "Well, unless you have money to buy some, I suggest you get used to not having it." Richard frowned. "What do you mean? There's nothing here?" Anna sighed. "No. There's no fancy breakfast, no freshly squeezed orange juice, no hot coffee waiting for you. I barely have enough money to buy food for myself." Richard looked at her as if she had spoken in another language. "Wait, are you saying you're poor?" Anna let out a humorless laugh. "Wow, the way you say it, like it's some kind of disease." Richard ran a hand through his messy hair. I didn't expect this." "Well, welcome to reality," Anna muttered. "Not everyone has money. Some of us actually have to work to survive." Richard leaned against the counter, looking deep in thought. "That's strange." Anna raised an eyebrow. "What is?" He hesitated before answering. "I don't know why, but it just doesn't feel like something I would be used to." Anna studied him carefully. He was confused, but there was something else in his expression, something uncertain. "You don't look like someone who's used to struggling," she said slowly. "Your hands, they're too smooth, no calluses. And the way you talk, the way you expect things to be handed to you." Richard looked at his hands as if noticing them for the first time. "You might be rich," she continued. "That would explain why you're so entitled." Richard frowned. "Maybe." Anna sighed. "But until you remember, none of that matters. Because right now, you're broke, and you're in my house, which means you follow my rules." Richard met her gaze. "And what are those rules?" Anna took a deep breath. 1. You do not demand things from me. If you want food, you find a way to earn it. 2. You do not complain about my apartment. It's all I have, and you're lucky I even let you stay here. And 3? She stepped closer, jabbing a finger at his chest. 3. You better not make my life harder than it already is. Richard smirked slightly. You're very bossy, you know that? Anna rolled her eyes. And you're very annoying. Now get out of my kitchen. Richard chuckled but didn't argue. Instead, he walked to the couch and flopped down with a sigh. Anna rubbed her head. This was going to be harder than she thought. Richard had never known hunger. Not real hunger. Not the kind that gnawed at your stomach and made your head spin when you hadn't eaten properly for days. Yet here he was, sitting in Anna's tiny apartment, staring at a half-empty loaf of bread and a nearly finished jar of peanut butter. Is this breakfast? He asked, frowning. Anna, who was pulling on her shoes, barely glanced at him. Unless you can afford something else, then yes. Richard sighed and picked up a slice of bread. He had been here for only 2 days, and already he was realizing how little Anna had. There was no stocked fridge, no expensive coffee, no lazy mornings with breakfast served on a tray like he imagined life should be. Even with his memory gone, he always felt things should be handed to him. It was an unexplainable instinct he couldn't explain. But somehow, this was survival, and he hated it. Anna grabbed her bag and slung it over her shoulder. Come on, you're coming with me today. Richard raised an eyebrow. Coming where? To work, she said simply. You need food, don't you? Well, you better start earning it. Richard stared at her, then down at the dry bread in his hand. He sighed again. Fine. The moment Richard stepped into the small fast food restaurant where Anna worked, he knew he wasn't going to like it. The place smelled like oil and fried chicken. The counters were covered in stains, sizzling grills, and impatient customers yelling their orders. Anna walked up to the manager, a short, tired-looking woman named Mama Kanye. Morning, Mama Kanye, Anna greeted with a small smile. I brought a friend. He needs a job. Mama Kanye eyed Richard from head to toe. Friend? She scoffed. He doesn't look like he's ever worked a day in his life. Richard straightened. That's not true. Anna smirked. Really? What's the last job you had? Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. Mama Kanye chuckled. That's what I thought. Anna leaned in. Please, Mama. Just let him try. Mama Kanye sighed. Fine, but if he messes up, it's on you. Richard gave Anna a side glance. Thanks for the vote of confidence. She grinned. You'll survive. Richard had no idea that working in a fast food restaurant could be so hard. He struggled with everything. He burned his hand on the fryer. He spilled a tray of drinks on a customer. He mixed up orders and got yelled at by an angry mother who wanted a chicken burger but got a veggie wrap instead. Are you doing this on purpose? Anna asked as she watched him struggle to carry a tray of food without dropping it. No, Richard muttered, balancing the tray carefully. This is just not what I'm used to. Anna snorted. Yeah, I figured. Richard sighed. His body ached. His clothes smelled like oil, and his pride had taken a serious beating. But then, something strange happened. As the hours passed, he started to get the hang of things. He learned how to take orders faster. He learned how to flip burgers without burning them. And, surprisingly, he started feeling something different. He looked around at the other workers, people who had no choice but to be here. People like Anna, who worked long hours just to survive. Meanwhile, at Robert's Group, the boardroom at Robert's Group was filled with tension. Jason Roberts stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on the polished wood. The board members sat around him, their faces filled with uncertainty. It's been days, Jason said, his voice calm but firm. We have no news on Richard. The search teams have found nothing. It's time to face reality. He's gone. A murmur spread through the room. One of the senior board members, Mr. Daniels, cleared his throat. With all due respect, Jason, your father has not declared Richard dead. We can't assume anything yet. Jason smirked. I understand, but we also can't allow the company to be left without leadership. Investors are panicking. We need stability, and that means we need a new CEO. Another board member spoke up. You mean yourself? Jason gave a fake smile. Who else? I am the eldest Robert's sons. I have experience. And unlike Richard, I won't disappear when the company needs me most. Some board members nodded in agreement, but others still hesitated. Jason noticed. He leaned forward. Look, I'm not asking for much, just a temporary appointment. If Richard miraculously comes back, we'll reconsider. But until then, let's not let the company fall apart. A long silence filled the room. Then slowly, one by one, the board members nodded. Jason leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Step one was complete. At the Roberts mansion, Margaret Roberts sat in front of the television, clutching a blanket. The news continued playing updates about the search for Richard. No body, no new leads. But she refused to believe he was dead. Her husband, Thomas, sat beside her. Margaret turned to him. We need to do more. The police aren't moving fast enough. Thomas exhaled. We are doing everything we can. Margaret shook her head. No. We need private investigators. More search teams. Something. Thomas finally looked at her. Margaret, if Richard is truly gone... She stood up suddenly. No, don't say that. Her voice broke. I would know if my son was dead. I would feel it. Thomas sighed and rubbed his temples. Jason is already moving to take over the company. If Richard doesn't come back soon... Margaret's eyes filled with determination. Then we have to bring him back. She didn't care what it took. She would find her son. Meanwhile, far from Robert's family mansion, Richard never thought he'd say it, but he was getting used to waking up on a couch. Sort of. His body still ached every morning, his muscles sore from the long shifts at the fast food restaurant, and he still hated the feeling of not knowing who he was. But something about the small, messy apartment in Soweto was starting to feel familiar. Anna, on the other hand, was not adjusting to him as well. Every morning she had to remind him of basic things. Mr. No Memory, stop using all the hot water. You're not in a hotel. M&M, don't just throw your clothes everywhere, pick them up. Mister, that was my last slice of bread. His response was always the same, a lazy smirk and an annoying shrug. You told me to act like I live here, he'd say. So I am. Anna groaned. Not like that. She was convinced that he had been a rich man in his past life. There was no other explanation for how clueless he was about basic survival. After 2 days at the restaurant, Anna decided Richard needed to try something different. You're not completely useless, she admitted, crossing her arms. Richard smirked. Wow, Anna. That almost sounded like a compliment. She ignored him. You're still too slow for the restaurant, but I think you do better at Lebo's supermarket. It's a little quieter, and they need extra help in the evenings. Let me guess, Richard said, raising an eyebrow. You work there too? Anna shrugged. Gotta pay rent somehow. So that evening, Richard found himself at Lebo's supermarket, wearing an apron and standing behind a cash register. The store was small, with shelves stacked with canned food, fresh vegetables, and everyday essentials. A few customers walked in and out, greeting each other casually. It was much calmer than the restaurant. But it was still work. And Richard was terrible at it. He struggled with scanning items. He kept forgetting to greet customers, and he had no idea how to bag groceries properly. At one point, an old woman looked at him and sighed. You're handsome, but you're very slow. Anna burst out laughing from across the store. I'm trying, okay? Richard muttered, glaring at her. By the end of the shift, his legs were sore and his back ached. He had never been this exhausted in his life. How do you do this every day? He asked Anna as they walked home. Anna chuckled. I don't have a choice. Richard sighed. Well, this sucks. Anna smirked. Welcome to the real world. The more time they spent together, the more Richard and Anna bickered. It was almost too easy to argue with him. You're using way too much of that dishwasher, Anna groaned one evening as she watched him wash dishes. Richard frowned. How much am I supposed to use? Not half the bottle. A few days later, she caught him struggling to sweep the floor. "Are you seriously holding the broom like that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Richard looked down at his grip. "What's wrong with it?" Anna shook her head. "It's just wrong. Give it to me." Richard refused. "I can do it." "Mr. No Memory, you're sweeping dust under the couch. It's fine." "It's not fine." But for every moment they argued, there were also moments of quiet understanding. One night after work, Anna sat on the couch, rubbing her tired feet. Without saying a word, Richard grabbed her foot and started massaging it. Anna tensed. "What are you doing?" "You looked like you were in pain," he said simply, not looking at her. "And I figured, maybe I should do something nice for you for once." Anna swallowed. Her heart pounded, but she quickly covered it up with her usual attitude. "Well, don't expect me to return the favor," she muttered. Richard smirked. Didn't ask. As the days passed, Richard started noticing small things about Anna, like how she hummed softly when she was cooking, or how she always tapped her fingers against her leg when she was thinking. He found himself staring at her sometimes, wondering why being around her felt so natural. Anna, on the other hand, was just as confused. She knew she should be annoyed by Richard. He was arrogant, lazy, and completely useless when it came to housework. But then there were moments, small, unexpected moments, where he made her laugh or showed a rare moment of kindness, and she felt something strange in her chest. Something she wasn't ready to admit. So instead of dealing with it, they kept bickering. Because it was easier than facing whatever was happening between them. Meanwhile, at Roberts' group, Jason Roberts sat in his office staring at the latest reports. The company was unstable. Investors were losing confidence. He needed to move quickly. He called a secret meeting with the board members. "It's time," he said. "We need an official vote to name a new CEO." Mr. Daniels hesitated. "Your father hasn't approved this." "My father is grieving," Jason interrupted. "We need leadership now." Some board members nodded. Others still looked unsure. Jason smirked. "Don't worry. By next week, Roberts' group will have a new leader." Richard's dreams were strange. Every night he would see blurry images, people he didn't recognize, places that felt familiar but distant, moments that disappeared before he could grasp them. A man's voice, deep and authoritative. A shining glass office. A black car driving fast through a city. And then, dark water. He always woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. The strangest part? Every time he closed his eyes, one word kept coming back. Richard. The name echoed in his mind like a whisper, growing louder each day. One morning, as Anna set the table with 2 slices of dry toast, Richard leaned against the counter, rubbing his temples. She noticed his silence. "What's wrong with you?" Richard hesitated, then looked at her. I remember something." Anna's eyes widened. "What?" "My name," he said slowly, as if testing the words on his tongue. "I think my name is Richard." Anna blinked. "Richard?" He nodded. "Yeah, that's the name that keeps coming to me." Anna folded her arms. "Are you sure? Because Mr. No Memory kind of suits you." Richard rolled his eyes. "Just call me Richard." Anna smirked. "All right, Richard, but until you remember more, you're still Mr. No Memory to me." Richard sighed but didn't argue. At least he had something now. A name. But why did it feel so important? As the days passed, Anna started noticing something odd about Richard. The way he carried himself, the confidence, the posture, the way he seemed used to being in control. And then there were his expensive habits. He always expected things to be done a certain way. He complained when she bought the cheapest brands of food. He handled money like someone who had never worried about it before. One afternoon, when they were walking home from work, they passed by a store selling luxury watches. Richard stopped, staring at one of them through the glass. Anna raised an eyebrow. "What? You see something you like?" Richard tilted his head. "I don't know. That watch." He pointed at a sleek black design with a silver rim. I feel like I've seen it before. Anna looked at him carefully. You feel like you've seen it before. Richard frowned, trying to focus. Then he shook his head. Never mind. Anna didn't push, but something inside her clicked. He's not just some random guy. And for the first time, she wondered, was she living with someone dangerous? At Robert's group, Jason sat at his desk, scrolling through the latest reports. The company was still unstable. Investors were panicking. But none of that mattered, because he had a plan. He picked up his phone and called Detective Muller, a private investigator he had hired in secret. Any news? Jason asked, his voice sharp. Muller sighed. Nothing yet. No body, no sightings. But if your brother is alive, he's not using his name or his money. Jason clenched his jaw. Find him. I don't care how long it takes. If Richard comes back, my plan is ruined. Muller hesitated. Sir, are you sure you want to do this? If your father finds out... Jason slammed his hand on the desk. That's exactly the point, Muller. My father still won't hand me the company, even with Richard gone. He thinks I'm incompetent. His voice was bitter. If Richard is alive, he'll take back everything. I won't let that happen. Muller sighed. I'll keep looking. Jason smirked. Good. Because by the time we're done, Richard Roberts will either be officially declared dead, or he'll wish he was. At the Roberts mansion, Thomas Roberts sat in his office, his fingers tapping against the wooden desk. Jason had come to him earlier, demanding that he be named CEO. But Thomas had refused. Jason wasn't ready. He was not as competent as Richard. He was also careless and impulsive. And deep down, Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was still alive. Meanwhile, Anna had always been careful about who she let into her life. She had lost too many people. She knew better than to grow attached to anyone. But Richard was making that difficult. Even with his arrogance, his cluelessness about the real world, and his frustrating habits, she found herself enjoying his company. It started with small things, like how they sat together after work, too tired to argue. Like how she caught him humming to himself while washing dishes. Like how he always made sure she had a cup of tea before bed, even though she had never asked. And then, there were the conversations. One evening, they sat on the couch, both exhausted from another long shift at Lebo's supermarket. Anna had her feet up, her head resting against the cushion, while Richard stared at the ceiling. I don't get it, Richard said suddenly. How do you keep going? Anna glanced at him. What do you mean? He sighed. You work all day. You barely have enough money to eat, and yet you're still standing. You're still laughing. How? Anna exhaled, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. Because I have no other choice. Richard turned his head to look at her. Anna shrugged. My dad died when I was little. My mom and I struggled together for years. We barely had enough, but she always found a way to make life beautiful. She painted, she laughed. She made me believe that no matter how hard things were, there was still something good in the world. Richard was quiet, listening. Anna swallowed. And then she died. And suddenly, it was just me. No family, no support, just work and bills and trying to survive. She let out a small laugh, but there was no humor in it. If I stop, I fall, so I keep going. Richard's chest tightened. He had never met anyone like Anna before. She was strong in a way he had never known, unbreakable. And suddenly he wanted to know more. What was she like? Your mom? He asked softly. Anna smiled faintly. She was warm. She was full of color like her paintings. She made me believe I could do anything. Richard studied her, watching the way her face softened when she spoke about her mother. I think she'd be proud of you, he said. Anna's breath hitched. She looked at him, searching his face, and for the first time she didn't see Mr. No Memory, the clueless man who had crashed into her life. She saw Richard, and that terrified her. Of course, the deep conversations didn't mean they had stopped arguing. You left the toilet unkept again, Anna grumbled as she wiped down the bathroom sink the next morning. Richard smirked. You act like that's a crime. It is, Anna shot back. One more time and I'm kicking you out. Richard chuckled. No, you won't. Anna glared at him. Try me. A few minutes later, Richard was struggling to fold the laundry. Anna watched from the kitchen, amused. What are you doing? Richard huffed. Folding clothes. Clearly. That's not folding, that's wrinkling. Richard groaned. I don't understand why people even fold clothes. You just wear them again. Anna rolled her eyes. You definitely came from a rich life. He smirked. You're just jealous. She threw a dish towel at his face. And even though they bickered, there was something different now. The tension between them wasn't just from annoyance. It was something else, something dangerous. One night, Anna came home later than usual. She had worked a double shift, barely eaten, and her body was aching from head to toe. She didn't even have the energy to be annoyed when she walked into the apartment and found Richard lounging on the couch. Rough day? He asked. Anna sighed, tossing her bag aside. You have no idea. She sat down heavily on the couch, rubbing her temples. I think my boss actually hates me, and my feet feel like they're about to fall off. Richard watched her for a moment, then without saying a word, he stood up and walked behind her. Anna stiffened when she felt his hands on her shoulders. What are you doing? Richard rolled his eyes. Relax. You look like you need this. Before she could argue, he started massaging her shoulders. And God help her, it felt amazing. Anna melted under his touch, letting out an involuntary sigh. His fingers worked expertly over her tense muscles, easing away the stress of the day. She closed her eyes, trying to ignore the way her skin tingled under his touch. I didn't know you were good at this, she muttered. Richard smirked. There's a lot you don't know about me. Anna's heart pounded. She turned slightly, looking up at him. He was so close, closer than they had ever been. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something deep, something intense. She swallowed hard. Richard. For the first time, she said his name softly, not in frustration or sarcasm, but as something real. Richard's gaze flickered to her lips. The air between them changed. Anna's breath caught in her throat. He was leaning closer. She didn't move away. Their faces were just inches apart when suddenly, bang! A loud crash came from outside the window, snapping them out of the moment. Anna jolted back, clearing her throat. I should check what that was. Richard ran a hand through his hair, looking away. Yeah, sure. The moment was gone, but the tension remained. Anna could still feel the warmth of his hands on her shoulders. And for the first time, she admitted it to herself. She liked him. 2 weeks after the intimate moment they shared, the first memory hit Richard like a wave. He had been sweeping the floor at Lebo's supermarket, minding his own business, when suddenly a flash. A grand office, a desk made of fine wood, a sleek watch on his wrist, a nameplate with Richard Roberts, CEO, engraved in gold. He gasped, gripping the broom tightly. His breath came in short, shallow bursts. Then, another memory. A boardroom. A group of men in suits looking at him, waiting for him to speak. A voice in his head. You are in charge. You make the decisions. Richard stumbled back, pressing a hand to his forehead. The memories weren't just flashes anymore. They were real. And he finally knew who he was. Everything came back like a flood in just an instant. That night, Richard lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. I'm Richard Roberts, CEO of Roberts Group, a billionaire. The knowledge felt heavy. He had spent weeks living as a nobody, struggling to work, surviving on Anna's kindness. And now, he remembered it all. But for some reason, he couldn't bring himself to tell her. Maybe it was because, for the first time in his life, he had felt free with her. Or maybe it was because he was afraid of what she would do if she found out the truth. Would she kick him out? Would she hate him for lying? Richard exhaled. He needed to handle this carefully. So, the next morning, before Anna woke up, he borrowed her phone and called someone he knew he could trust. Richard sat on a bench near a quiet alleyway, keeping his voice low. "Are you sure it's you?" came the shocked voice of Michael Harris, his lawyer and longtime friend. "It's me," Richard said firmly. "I need you to keep this quiet. I don't want Jason or anyone else to know yet." Michael hesitated. "Mr. Richard, your brother is trying to take over the company. He's been pushing the board to vote him in as CEO. Your father has been resisting, but without proof that you're alive." "I know," Richard interrupted. "That's why I need you to stall him. I'm coming back soon, but I need to do this my way." Michael sighed. "Fine, but be careful. Jason is desperate. If he finds out you're alive, who knows what he'll do." Richard clenched his jaw. "That's exactly why I don't want him knowing yet." As he ended the call, he exhaled deeply. The game wasn't over yet. Meanwhile, at Roberts Group, Jason paced his office, his jaw tight with frustration. Detective Mueller stood before him, looking uncomfortable. "So you're telling me," Jason said slowly, "that after weeks of searching, you have nothing?" Mueller cleared his throat. "We've followed every lead, sir. But if Richard is alive, he's doing a damn good job staying hidden." Jason slammed his fist on the desk. "That's not good enough." Mueller hesitated. "Sir, maybe it's time to accept that he's gone." Jason narrowed his eyes. "You don't know my brother. He's not the type to just disappear." Mueller sighed. "Then what do you want me to do?" Jason smirked. "Simple. I want you to stop looking for Richard and focus on making sure everyone else believes he's dead." Mueller frowned. "That's risky." Jason leaned back. "So is waiting around for him to come back and ruin my plans." Later that evening, Anna walked into the apartment after work, exhausted. Richard was sitting on the couch, scrolling through something on the phone she had lent him earlier. "Hey," she mumbled, kicking off her shoes. "How was your day?" Richard looked up quickly. "Fine, same as always." Anna didn't think much of it, until later, when she picked up her phone to check her messages. That's when she saw it, a missed call notification. She frowned. She hadn't made any calls that day. Curious, she checked her call log, and then she froze. Michael Harris. Her heart pounded as she quickly searched the name on the internet. Her eyes widened as she read the result. Michael Harris, corporate lawyer for Roberts Group. Anna felt her stomach drop. Roberts Group? She kept scrolling. That's when she saw it. A news article. Richard Roberts, CEO of Roberts Group, missing after tragic accident. Her breath caught in her throat as she clicked on the article and saw the photo. It was him. Richard. Her Richard. But not her Richard. Not the struggling, clueless man who worked at the supermarket with her. Not the man who slept on her couch and complained about cheap food. This was a billionaire, a powerful man, a man who had lied to her. Anna's hands shook as she locked her phone and set it down. She turned and looked at Richard, who was still sitting on the couch, completely unaware of what she had just discovered. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to breathe. She could confront him right now. She could demand answers, but instead, she stayed quiet. Because suddenly, she wasn't just angry. She was afraid, not of him, but of the truth. Because if Richard was really that man from the news, then everything between them had been a lie, and he would definitely leave her. 3 days later, Richard sat alone in a dimly lit office, the sound of the city outside barely reaching his ears. Across from him, Michael Harris placed a thick folder on the table. "This is everything you asked for," Michael said. His voice was grave. "And I have to warn you, it's worse than we thought." Richard already knew what was coming. His gut had told him from the moment he woke up with no memory, from the moment Jason pushed to take over the company. His brother had never been able to stand the fact that their father trusted him more. Jason had always been envious, always looking for ways to outshine him. But Richard never thought Jason would go as far as trying to kill him. Michael continued. "Your accident wasn't an accident. The car that hit you was traced back to one of Jason's business associates. It was a setup, Richard. He wanted you gone." Richard clenched his fists. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't even hurt. He was furious. His own brother had tried to have him killed. For money, for power. And Jason had almost won. Richard exhaled sharply, forcing himself to stay calm. Does my father know? Michael hesitated. Not yet. He and your mother are still hoping for answers. They never truly believed you were dead. Richard's chest tightened. His mother, his father. He had to let them know. He pushed back his chair and stood. His face was set, his voice steady. It's time, he said. I'm going back. The news hit Roberts Group like an earthquake. 1 minute. Jason Roberts was standing in the boardroom, preparing to be voted in as the new CEO. The next, the doors swung open and the room fell silent. Because Richard Roberts had just walked in. The gasps were instant. Some board members stood in shock. Others whispered among themselves. Jason's face drained of color. Richard stepped forward, looking completely calm, but his eyes burned with silent rage. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, his voice smooth and controlled. Jason swallowed hard, trying to mask his panic. Richard, he stammered. You're alive. Richard smirked, disappointed. Jason laughed nervously. Of course not. This is great news, really. But where have you been? Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Oh, you know. Recovering from the accident you planned. A heavy silence filled the room. Jason's expression faltered for a second, but he quickly recovered. Richard, I don't know what you're talking about. Richard cut him off. Save it. I have proof. The car that ran me off the bridge, traced back to one of your business partners. You paid someone to have me killed. A ripple of murmurs spread across the table. Mr. Daniels, one of the senior board members, turned to Jason. Is this true? Jason scoffed. This is ridiculous. Richard, I would never. Richard pulled out a folder and tossed it onto the table. I had a private investigation conducted. Every transaction, every meeting, every detail, it's all there. Jason didn't even look at it. He clenched his fists. So what? Are you going to have me arrested? Richard leaned in slightly. I could, and I still might. But for now, let's start with this. I'm taking back the company. Jason opened his mouth to argue, but Thomas Roberts, their father, suddenly stood. Enough, their father said. His voice was tired but firm. Jason's face turned red with rage. Dad, you can't. Margaret Roberts, their mother, who is also a member of the board, stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. You're alive, she whispered. She rushed forward and pulled Richard into a tight hug. I knew you'd come back. Richard's arms wrapped around her. He felt her shaking. I'm here, Mom, he said softly. I'm home. After everything was settled, after Jason was officially removed from any position of power, Richard left the building and stepped into the fresh evening air. He had done what he came to do. But something still didn't feel right. Anna. She was the only thing missing. She had taken him in when he was nobody. She had given him food, shelter, herself. Richard knocked on the door of the small apartment in Soweto. No answer. He knocked again. Anna, it's me. Nothing. Finally, the door opened, but Anna didn't step aside to let him in. She just stared at him, her arms crossed. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes were full of hurt. Richard swallowed. I wanted to explain. Anna shook her head. You don't need to. Richard frowned. Anna, You lied to me, she said quietly. Richard hesitated. I didn't. Anna cut him off. You knew who you were, and you didn't tell me. You even went back to the company. You can imagine me finding out about that from a news feed. Richard's chest tightened. I wanted to tell you, but you didn't. Silence. Anna took a deep breath. You don't belong here, Richard. You never did. Richard felt something in his chest crack. That's not true. Anna looked away. Just go. Richard clenched his jaw. He wanted to argue. He wanted to fix this. But for the first time since regaining his memory, he felt completely helpless. So, with a heavy heart, he turned and walked away. And Anna closed the door behind him and sobbed quietly. For days, Richard had tried to talk to Anna, but she wouldn't let him. She was still hurt. She still felt betrayed. But he refused to give up. Finally, one evening he showed up at her apartment again, looking hesitant but determined. "I know you don't want to see me," Richard said, his voice softer than usual. "And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness yet, but my parents want to meet you." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Your parents?" Richard nodded. "They want to thank you for taking care of me, for keeping me safe even when I had no memory of who I was." Anna crossed her arms. "And if I say no?" Richard sighed. "Then I'll respect that. But my father, he's a good man. And my mother?" He paused. "She's been through a lot, worrying about me. It would mean a lot if you came." Anna hesitated. She still wasn't sure if she could trust him. But she wasn't heartless. She sighed. "Fine. But I'm not going for you. I'm going out of respect for your parents." Richard's lips twitched into a small smile. "That's all I'm asking." When Anna stepped into the Grand Roberts mansion, she felt completely out of place. The house was massive, with towering pillars, sparkling chandeliers, and walls lined with expensive paintings. It was the kind of place she had only seen in magazines. She felt small. But when Margaret Roberts saw her, she rushed forward with open arms. "You must be Anna," she said warmly, pulling her into a tight hug. "We've heard so much about you." Anna blinked in surprise. "You have?" Margaret smiled. "Of course. You took care of my son when we thought we lost him. I can never thank you enough." Thomas Roberts, Richard's father, stood nearby, watching them with quiet curiosity. "You look familiar?" he said slowly, studying her face. Anna frowned. "I do?" Before anyone could respond, they were called into the dining room. Anna felt overwhelmed by the luxurious setting. The long dining table, the golden plates, the servants waiting to pour their drinks. This was not her world. But something was about to change everything. Halfway through dinner, Thomas Roberts suddenly set down his fork, staring at Anna intently. "What did you say your full name was again?" he asked. Anna blinked. "Anna Mokwena." Thomas's expression changed instantly. His eyes widened and he leaned forward. "Mokwena?" he repeated. "Your mother? What was her name?" Anna hesitated. "Nandi Mokwena. She was an artist." Margaret gasped softly. Richard looked confused. But Thomas? His entire body tensed, and he exhaled sharply, as if the air had been knocked out of him. "My God," he whispered. "Nandi." Anna frowned. You knew my mother?" Thomas looked emotional, almost shaken. "I didn't just know her. She saved me." Richard furrowed his brow. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Thomas turned to him. "Before Roberts Group became what it is today, I was struggling. I had nothing. I had just lost my business partner, and I was drowning in debt. I was ready to give up." He swallowed hard. "Then I met Nandi. She was the kindest soul I'd ever met. She gave me hope. She introduced me to the right people, connected me to investors, even lent me money from the little she had, without asking for anything in return." Anna's breath hitched. That sounded like her mother. Thomas continued. "She refused to take payment, but I promised her something. I told her that when Roberts Group became successful, I would make sure she was rewarded. I promised her 5% of the company's shares." A heavy silence filled the room. "But then, I lost contact with her. I tried to find her for years, but she was gone." Thomas's voice broke slightly. "And now, you're telling me she's dead?" Anna lowered her gaze. "She passed away a few months ago." Thomas closed his eyes, grief flashing across his face. "I never got to repay her." Then he turned to Anna. "But the shares still belong to her," he said firmly. "Which means they belong to you." Anna's eyes widened. Wait, what? Richard sat back, stunned. Thomas nodded. You are legally entitled to 5% of Robert's group. Anna felt like the room was spinning. No, that's a mistake. I can't. Thomas gave her a gentle smile. Take your time. Think about it. But this isn't charity, Anna. This is what your mother earned. Anna's throat tightened. She had spent her whole life struggling, scraping by just to survive. And now she was being offered something that could change her life forever. Meanwhile, in a dark corner of a private bar, Jason Roberts downed another glass of whiskey. He was furious. Richard had ruined everything. And now, the nobody girl who had taken him in was getting a piece of his inheritance? He slammed his glass down. He had lost everything. So what did he have left to lose? A sinister smirk spread across his lips. If Richard thought he had won, he was wrong, because Jason still had one more move to make. And this time, he would make sure there was no coming back. Anna sat on the balcony of her tiny apartment, staring at the city lights in the distance. Her mind was a mess. One moment, she was just Anna Mokoena, a struggling woman trying to survive. The next, she was the daughter of Nandi Mokoena, a woman whose kindness had built one of the biggest business empires in the country. And now, she was being offered 5% of Robert's group, a fortune beyond anything she had ever imagined. She should have been happy, but instead she felt lost. She wasn't one of them. She wasn't like Richard or his family. This wasn't her world. And then there was him. Richard had tried to call. He had sent messages, but Anna wasn't ready to talk. Because no matter how much she tried to deny it, she had fallen for him. And that scared her more than anything. Richard had never been the type to chase anyone. But Anna? She was different. She had saved him when he had nothing. She had taught him how to live like a normal person. She had seen him at his weakest, and she hadn't turned away. And now, he had to prove that she mattered to him. So he did something crazy. Something big. The next morning, when Anna arrived at Lebo's supermarket, she found the doors locked. A closed for business sign hung on the front. Her stomach twisted. Had she just lost her job? Then she saw Richard standing by the entrance, dressed in a crisp suit, holding a set of keys. Anna crossed her arms. What are you doing here? Richard took a deep breath. I bought it. Anna blinked. You bought what? The supermarket, Richard said. It's yours now. Anna laughed, but it wasn't out of amusement. You're joking. Richard shook his head. No, Anna, I mean it. You've worked here for years, breaking your back just to get by. Now you don't have to. You own it. You can run it however you want. Anna's heart pounded. Why would you do this? Richard stepped closer. Because I love you. Her breath hitched. He had said it. The words hung between them, heavy and real. I love you, Anna, he repeated, his voice steady. And I don't care about money, or the company, or any of it. I care about you. And I know I messed up, but I need you to know. You were never just some part of my life while I was lost. You are my life. Tears welled in Anna's eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to run into his arms. But before she could say anything, a loud crash echoed from across the street. Anna turned, her heart stopping. A black car, a figure stepping out, and the last person she ever wanted to see. Jason. Jason had lost everything, and it was all because of her. If Anna hadn't saved Richard, if she hadn't brought him back, none of this would have happened. So if he couldn't have the company, he would make sure she suffered instead. His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with rage. You've caused enough trouble, Anna. Richard immediately stepped in front of her. Jason, leave. Jason chuckled darkly. Oh, little brother, always trying to be the hero. Anna's pulse raced. She could see something in Jason's hand, a gun. Richard tensed. You don't want to do this. Jason smirked. Oh, but I do. And then bang! A gunshot echoed through the street. The gunshot rang through the air. Anna's breath caught in her throat as time seemed to slow. Richard shoved her behind him, his arms shielding her. A second later, security guards rushed in, tackling Jason to the ground. The gun clattered onto the pavement, sliding away. Jason struggled, shouting in rage. "You ruined everything!" he screamed. "This was mine! The company, the money! It was supposed to be mine!" Richard knelt down, breathing heavily, his heart still pounding in his chest. "Jason," he said coldly, "it was never yours to take." The police arrived within minutes, dragging Jason away in handcuffs. Anna watched in silence, her hands still shaking. The fear of almost losing Richard, of almost losing another person she cared about, settled deep inside her. And that's when she knew. Later that night, Richard found Anna sitting on the rooftop of her apartment, staring up at the stars. He sat beside her, but she didn't speak. Instead, she turned to him, her eyes filled with something deep, something raw. "I thought I was going to lose you today," she whispered. Richard reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Anna swallowed. "That's what scares me." Richard frowned. "What do you mean?" Anna exhaled. "I've lost so many people, Richard. My father, my mother. I got used to being alone because it was easier than caring for someone and losing them." She bit her lip. "That's why I pushed you away. Because if I admitted how I felt about you, and then lost you, I don't think I'd survive that." Richard's heart clenched. He cupped her face gently, forcing her to look at him. "Anna," he said softly, "you're not going to lose me." Tears filled her eyes. "I love you, Richard." Richard smiled, his thumb brushing away a tear that slipped down her cheek. "I love you too." And this time there were no interruptions, no hesitation, no doubts. Richard leaned in, pressing his lips to hers, and for the first time in his life, he felt completely whole. A week later, Jason stood before a judge, facing charges of attempted murder, twice. With the evidence stacked against him, there was no escape. The courtroom was silent as the judge delivered the verdict. "Jason Roberts, you are hereby sentenced to 15 years in prison." Richard sat beside his parents, watching as his brother was led away. Thomas Roberts sighed. "I should have seen it coming." Margaret wiped away tears. "We lost one son to greed, but we got another back." She turned to Richard, squeezing his hand. "And that's what matters." Thomas finally looked at Richard, his expression serious but proud. "You are the rightful leader of Roberts' group," he said, "and now I see that more clearly than ever." Richard nodded. "Thank you, Dad." It was the first time he had heard those words from his father, and they meant everything. After everything, Thomas once again extended his offer to Anna. "The shares are yours, Anna," he said. "Your mother earned them. You deserve this." Anna looked at the documents in front of her. The wealth, the power, it was all within reach. But she shook her head. "I appreciate this, Mr. Roberts," she said sincerely. "But this world, it's not for me." She smiled softly. "I just want a simple life. A life I choose." Thomas nodded, respect shining in his eyes. "You are truly your mother's daughter." Anna smiled. "That's the best thing anyone has ever said to me." With Jason gone and the company secure, Richard and Anna started a new life together. Not in a mansion, not in the complicated world, but in a quiet home, beautiful home, where laughter filled the air and love felt easy. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Anna leaned against Richard's shoulder. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I never hit you with my scooter that night?" she teased. Richard chuckled. "I'd probably still be lost." Anna smirked. "You were pretty useless." Richard kissed her forehead. But I found my way. He looked into her eyes, and I found you. Anna smiled, her heart full. She had spent so much of her life afraid of love, afraid of loss. But now, as she sat beside the man she loved, she realized something. Love wasn't about guarantees. It was about choosing someone every day. And she would choose Richard over and over again. Always.